Hello and welcome to I Am with Eric Faria. I am your host, and it is my pleasure to have here with me once again, she's back for episode number 2, Carla Pileggi Caviola, who is a psychotherapist and also a perinatal mental health specialist. Welcome back.
Thank you, Eric. Pleasure.
My pleasure to have you here as well.
Thank you.
So for this one, I know we talked about specifically about new moms and depression and all of that for the previous episode. And this one I wanted to focus specifically on depression as a theme and as it relates to the whole population, not just specifically for mothers. And I even mentioned to you that I had somebody in my family who was my grandmother who passed away 4 years ago, who was bipolar and suffered with depression for over 4 decades.
Yeah.
And I guess my first question would be, what is depression?
So depression, there's so many depressions, types of diagnoses, but for today's purpose, I don't think we need to talk so clinically speaking. But depression is typically when somebody has a change in their mood, so they might feel depressed. They would have a loss of interest in typical activities they might normally enjoy doing. For some people, would experience changes in their weight, increase or decrease. So maybe they've lost their appetite, or maybe they're just eating, more than what they normally would. Yeah. A loss in difficulties thinking, concentrating, making decisions, a loss in their lower kind of energy during the day. They just don't have the energy. They're feeling fatigued. They might even look like they're slower, just physical. And in some cases too, like we talked about, so the loss of appetite or change in appetite, increase or decrease. The same with sleep.
Sleep, yeah.
Yeah,
I was just going to ask.
Some people will sleep excessively, and they will literally feel like it's hard to get out of bed.
Right.
And some people just cannot sleep. So often waking up in the night is a symptom of depression. Sometimes multiple times, and then not being able to go back to sleep. And then the other thing that people can experience with depression in more severe cases is thoughts of death. Thoughts of death, dying, in some cases, thoughts of self-harm, right? Harming themselves, and that would include things like suicide, suicidal thoughts, sometimes suicidal gestures, and suicide attempts and plans. So, again, there's a whole spectrum of mild, moderate, severe symptoms of depression. But that being said, and some people might not even feel like they feel depressed, if you will, or down. It's more of like an irritability. They're just feeling kind of irritable or cranky, So sometimes they'll experience that as well.
So that's interesting because there are a lot of ways that people act in their day-to-day lives that for the outside world might not look like they are depressed, right?
Yes.
So there are different ways to mask the way that people act when they are in a work environment, for example. So they do the work, they're great workers, they go there, they're not late, there's nothing out of the ordinary, but deep down they are depressed. So how do you know, or how do you identify when you see someone who, quote unquote, looks normal? I don't like that word, but you know what I'm saying. But they are depressed, or they have symptoms of depression. How do you identify that when it's not so visible, or like the stereotypical thought that we have when we think about depression? Yeah.
So if you think of anyone that you know, whether it's family or friends, and you start noticing changes, just, let that be an indicator, right? So one of the main, and I think I forgot to mention before, but one of the main things that we can see when we notice changes in people that are depressed is they withdraw. They become very isolated. Maybe in teenagers, they want to just stay in their room. They don't want to come out for dinner. They don't want to engage with the family. They're very to themselves. Withdrawn and isolated. Okay, so that is a very clear sign right then and there that they're something might be happening, and we
Right.
need to kind of ask the right questions in an empathetic way, and if needed be, obviously get the right help, right?
Right. So, and you mentioned something about
Yes.
irritability.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I have noticed from time to time when I see somebody who is very cheery and upbeat and, always smiling, and then all of a sudden they're very irritable. Everything or anything that happens makes them very mad very fast. So that is also a symptom of depression, correct? Or can be.
It could be. I mean, there could also be a mood disorder. I know you mentioned before your grandmother had bipolar disorder. So that is a mood disorder. So instead of just feeling depressed or low,
she was either
it's
very
kind of,
chipper or very down.
Kind of up and down, up and down. And so that could be anything like a true manic state or a hypomanic state, and then feeling irritable, depressed, down. And so up and down. So absolutely. If one is feeling irritable, if one is starting to snap at people suddenly, that sort of thing, it could be some depression, maybe it could be mood. But that being said, again, a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist or primary physician, talk to your doctor. If you don't have a counselor, maybe see one. It doesn't mean you're signing your life away to counseling. But that being said, talk to somebody. Let's figure out what's happening and then get the help that you need. So if you notice that irritability, depression, feeling down, you don't have energy, you're feeling fatigued, all of these symptoms, again, we do live in a society where everybody wears masks and we have very high functioning people that sometimes we would never think are suffering from depression, right? Correct. On the outside, everything looks amazing, right? Oh, they must be having an amazing life, but nobody asks them how they're doing on the inside. Right? So it's important to ask questions when we see our family, our friends, our neighbors, whoever it might be, and you start noticing subtle changes. Pay attention and ask the questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And if they're not feeling great, provide that support and recommendation if needed. I mean, obviously, if they're having thoughts of death, harming themselves, suicide, that's definitely an indication they should be in treatment, right?
Sure.
And treatment is available. There's so many, I have a practice in Connecticut, but there's so many therapists in every state, and there is support. It's just a matter of sometimes making that call.
And taking the first step.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because I feel like it's still. And I want to talk about this with you specifically in the next segment, but I feel like there's a lot of stigma around psychotherapy and psychiatry, and still to this day, even though we are in 2018, almost 2019, people still believe that if you are going to see a psychologist, for example, you are quote unquote crazy, right?
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Some people believe that. Not everybody.
Not everybody.
Not everybody.
Thankfully, not everybody. Yes. So, okay. But so I definitely want to come back to that topic.
Sure.
So let's go on a little break here.
Okay.
But for everybody watching, we're going to be back right after this short break. Stick with us. Oi, pessoal. Tudo bem? Aqui é o Eric Faria. Espero que você esteja curtindo aí a entrevista. E hoje eu estou aqui para falar um pouquinho sobre comunicação com vocês. Parte do trabalho que eu faço como apresentador e produtor do I Am, tanto no podcast quanto no YouTube, é realmente a parte de me comunicar com as pessoas. Eu ouço histórias, eu gosto sempre de deixar uma gotinha, alguma coisa bem interessante para você aí que está assistindo poder colocar na prática na sua vida. E eu sou coach também, eu sou coach especializado em comunicação e sinergia já há quase 6 anos. Então, a gente muitas vezes não para pensar na nossa comunicação, tanto no trabalho quanto em casa, né, no ambiente, às vezes com os amigos. Como anda a sua comunicação? Parece que às vezes é muito difícil a gente chegar até o coração e a mente de uma outra pessoa, mas na verdade não é. Então eu estou aqui para falar com você hoje. Se você quiser ter uma nova perspectiva sobre comunicação para 2019, abrir novas portas, tanto pessoal quanto profissional, eu gostaria de trabalhar com você. Então vá até o meu website, www.ericfaria.com. Lá tem as minhas redes sociais também, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. e o Twitter. E você pode entrar em contato comigo através de lá também. Então é isso, estou abrindo novas turmas, quero que você tenha uma melhor comunicação em 2019 e eu te espero lá, tá bom? Então até mais. And welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. Once again, I have here with me Carla Pileggi Caviola. So, Carla, we ended the last segment talking about the stigma that, you know, some people still have around seeking help and going to see a psychologist, psychiatrist, a counselor. And why do you think that is?
I don't think people understand depression or different types of, mental health, right?
Yeah.
I think if they were to take a moment to look at why somebody might be feeling the way they're feeling, there would be less stigma, right? So in some cases, they have a genetic family history that comes down the bloodline, just like diabetes, just like, any kind of physical condition that can come down the family, tree, if you will. So can depression or mood disorders or anxiety and so forth, okay? So that being said, that it's nobody's fault, right?
Yeah.
That's genetic. And second of all, I think, we're human. We all have our own capacity. We all have, one of my professors said this, and I'll never forget, but if you think about a house and when it snows, it can only handle so much before it caves in.
Right.
And so we're all human, right? And so thinking about...
That's a great analogy, now that I think of it, yes.
Yeah, and so first and foremost, I think we're made to be, in community.
Yeah.
Right? We need community, we need support, just like, family and friends and everybody else, and even psychotherapists, people like myself, we need community. We're not supposed to be isolated, right? People. But that being said, we do, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Remind me where we were at.
Yeah,
I just
we were
lost
just
my
talking
train of
about the
thought.
stigma and why some people
Yes.
still think that it's, they are quote unquote crazy if they look for a doctor
Yes, I'm
or
sorry.
for help.
Thank you for reminding me. So
That's fine.
what I was going to say was environmental stressors. So this is a main thing why sometimes people might feel temporarily sad, depressed, down, irritable, stressed, anxious, or whatever as well, besides genetics, okay?
I see.
So it could be financial stress, relational stress, maybe they're in a toxic relationship, maybe there's some domestic violence going on. It could be anything from, obviously job insecurity to a job loss,
Work-related,
right?
for sure.
The economy, often gets people, stressed out. They're laying off jobs in my company, and so maybe they're coming in. And so again, it's this environmental stress that they're dealing with at that time. It could be a loss of a loved one.
Yes.
Right? And they need to grieve.
For sure. And I'm sorry to cut you off. I just, in my grandmother's case, she lost her young son. He was only 5, and he died of leukemia. And that was something that actually triggered. And before that, she had already lost her sister, who was only 18, and she had a heart attack, and she died.
Oh, no.
And so I feel like it was a combination of those things being so close together, those two events. And I feel like you mentioned something very interesting. You said about the outside environment, right? And it got me thinking about comparison. Because even for my grandmother, I remember that some of my relatives would go to her and say, well, but I've also lost a loved one, or I've also been through a traumatic event, and I am fine. Why don't you just, react? Why don't you just get it together, snap out of it? Yeah, and I always thought that it was so unfair because, like you said about capacity, right? Everybody has their own capacity. Maybe my grandmother didn't have the capacity that the other person saying that to her had.
Right. That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
It's exactly. You could have 100 people in the room here experiencing the same exact event, and they will experience it all differently.
Right.
Right? And their memory will be different. And for some people, absolutely, it could be traumatic. There's so many things environmentally that people deal with, right? It could be a car accident. It could be, all sorts of things, right? I mean, for let's talk about adolescence. You know, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of bullying. This is a major problem.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, there's just a lot of stressors and pressure nowadays that teenagers have to perform academically. Sometimes, you know, this is a major stress in our area too. The expectations to go to a certain university or to do a certain thing. There's a lot of pressure on these young people today. So
social media also.
Social media, again, that can be used in a bad way, and that's something that I've seen with some of my clients. So again, there's just so many things in our world that maybe back in our day, we didn't have to deal with, right?
For sure. But when I was growing up, there wasn't any social media.
Nobody had cell phones back then.
No, it's true. So yeah, these are all things that can contribute to somebody being stressed, being anxious, and I feel like, so what do you see as a way for example, for young people to navigate this rapid, you know, crazy, like by the minute world that we live in? Because there's so much information. For certainly when I was growing up, when I was maybe, you know, 20 years ago, we didn't have cell phones, or maybe we had cell phones, but we didn't have like smartphones. We couldn't check our emails or, you know, go on social media, Facebook, what have you. And now it's all there. There's a lot of information at once, and I feel like we are bombarded, and especially I feel so bad for the kids and for the teenagers that have to deal with this bombardment of information at all times. So what do we do about that?
So first of all, I would say it's okay to set boundaries, right? It's okay to, you know, if you find that there's toxicity around you, whether it's in people or whether it's in social media or whether it's, you know, wherever it's coming from, it's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries, okay? For some people, that might mean, you know what, take a social media fast. I love that idea, right? In this day and age, I think that can be a really healthy thing.
I think it's necessary in some cases,
And certainly realize, especially for the young people, but also for adults too, social media, people are putting on the best of everything on social media. The mask,
the facade, yes.
Yeah, they're not putting on their day-to-day, oh, I'm struggling with this, or I'm having this issue, for the most part.
Right.
Most people put, you know, all the good stuff on, and that's when they post. So just remember, it's not based on reality. So I think that's really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said, because, for example, somebody might be depressed and what they're putting on social media is completely the opposite of how they're feeling inside.
Yeah. I think it's important, you mentioned the word before, comparison at one point. Yeah. Sometimes it's, if you can just try to block all of that out too, and just forget about what people are doing or not doing. And I mean, again, social media can be great, and you're seeing your friends or family that maybe you don't get to see on a daily basis.
It's not all bad, for sure.
Yeah, but for some of the other stuff, okay, it's okay to realize that it's, again, not, it's not always real. And to just focus on yourself. Like, what am I doing with my life? And what's bringing me peace and joy, as opposed to focusing and comparing on other people.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? What are my goals? What is it that I want to accomplish? What brings me peace and joy? And taking care of yourself. And that's what this is all about. Right? And for, again, part of what we're talking about today is counseling, psychotherapy, whether you're depressed or everything else. This is really about you taking care of yourself. People taking care of themselves and their own mental health, their emotions. You don't have to be, you know, it's not about, you mentioned the word before, people thinking you're going to a therapist means that you're crazy. Let me tell you, most people aren't. Most people are not delusional or psychotic or what they would call crazy. Okay, but that being said, it can help you get towards your goals. My job is to help walk with my clients, hand in hand, walking towards the goals that they establish. You're preaching to the choir. I go to my psychologist and I see him every Tuesday. So yes, I totally agree with you. Yeah. And let me tell you, I know people that go to counseling or even couples therapy just to continue to, work on whatever goals they have or improve their marriage.
Exactly.
You know what? How about we improve the marriage and not, focus on whatever other things. Oh, we got to buy this or we got to renovate the house. How about focusing on you or the important relationships in your life?
For sure. I mean, I will end this segment with a phrase that you said, life can be so much better, and I totally agree with that. So seek help, right?
Yes.
Seek help and find not only having a virtual community is great, and a community where you actually see and you can look people in the eye and hug them and be together with them. I feel like that is even better.
It's richer.
It's richer, for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. So, this is our second segment, so we're going to be back very shortly, more with Carla after this. Stay with us. Oi pessoal, tudo bem? Aqui é o Eric Faria, espero que você esteja curtindo aí a entrevista. E hoje eu estou aqui para falar um pouquinho sobre comunicação com vocês. Parte do trabalho que eu faço como apresentador e produtor do I Am, tanto no podcast quanto no YouTube, é realmente a parte de me comunicar com as pessoas. Eu ouço histórias, eu gosto sempre de deixar uma gotinha, alguma coisa bem interessante para você aí que está assistindo poder colocar na prática na sua vida. E eu sou coach também, eu sou coach especializado em comunicação e sinergia já há quase 6 anos. Então, a gente muitas vezes não para pensar na nossa comunicação, tanto no trabalho quanto em casa, né, no ambiente, às vezes com os amigos. Como anda a sua comunicação? Parece que às vezes é muito difícil a gente chegar até o coração e a mente de uma outra pessoa, mas na verdade não é. Então eu estou aqui para falar com você hoje. Se você quiser ter uma nova perspectiva sobre comunicação para 2019, abrir novas portas, tanto pessoal quanto profissional, eu gostaria de trabalhar com você. Então vá até o meu website, www.ericfaria.com. Lá tem as minhas redes sociais também, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube e o Twitter. E você pode entrar em contato comigo através de lá também. Então é isso, estou abrindo novas turmas, quero que você tenha uma melhor comunicação em 2019 e eu te espero lá, tá bom? Então até mais. And welcome back to I Am. I have here with me once again Carla. So I would like to talk about a topic that unfortunately it's in the news very often. We hear this, especially with young people, which is suicide. And first of all, what do you think brings a person to the point of having suicidal thoughts or actually committing suicide?
Yeah. First and foremost, when people are so depressed, it's almost like they're walking around with dark sunglasses, right? Everything looks dark, everything is dreary, negative thinking, negative thoughts. They're in a place where they don't see that there's other options. They don't see that there's people like myself or their family or other forms of support that are actually trying to help pull them out of this dark pit. Okay, they can't see that there's a rope there. So they see suicide as the only option. Okay? So this is why we need to tell people that it's not the only option. There are many people like myself that are psychotherapists. There are many, besides therapy, support groups. There's, a whole bunch of resources that are helping people to feel better and feel more like themselves. Okay, and suicide is not the only option.
Yeah, I always remember I saw this video one time a few years ago about this man that jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and he survived. Have you seen it?
I saw that, yes.
Yeah, and that to me was such an eye-opener about suicide and about depression. And he said something I'm paraphrasing, but he said something to the tune of, he just wanted to end the pain.
Yes.
Right? He didn't want to kill himself. He just wanted the pain to go away. And having survived it, because most people that had done what he didn't survive it, unfortunately. But having survived it, he just had a completely new outlook on life, and just, you know, how rich and how beautiful and how there were so many people that wanted to help him and give him support.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's, and also for me specifically, I remember I didn't think about committing suicide, but when I was around 20, 21 years old and I was in college, I thought about just, you know, what if I just, you know, go to sleep and not wake up anymore, because I was feeling very depressed.
Yeah.
I was never diagnosed as having depression. I didn't at the time seek help, but I never thought of like, I'm going to take my own life. But I thought, you know, maybe if I just go to sleep and don't wake up, maybe the pain will go away and I won't have to deal with this anymore, like the day-to-day and getting out of bed. Even doing that was very hard for me at that point in my life. And also because of reasons that I was in the closet, and I was also not getting good grades anymore because of the depression. I was not paying attention in class. I didn't want to study. It was just like going through the motions day by day, right? So if you see somebody who is at that point in their lives where they don't want to get out of bed, where they don't want to get out of the bedroom, where they don't, the grades have fallen, and you know, how can we, maybe myself as a friend or as a family member, reach out to that person? Because I also feel like I wouldn't know what to do or say.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you want to tell your family and your friend that you care about them and that you notice changes and that you want them to be well. I think showing your compassion and love is always important in every scenario. Obviously, I know people get skittish around asking these questions, but it is important to ask the question, do you have any thoughts of death or dying? If they do, that's telling us that the depression is more severe. If they have any suicidal thoughts as well, it's obviously showing us that the depression is more severe. And if they're having thoughts of harming themselves and plans to do so, including suicidal plans, again, that's a time that one must call 911 in New York State or 211 in Connecticut. That's the emergency numbers for mental health. Or go to the emergency room to get an evaluation, a medical evaluation right away. So that being said, yes, when people do get the proper help, and in those cases of, you know, especially more severe cases when we're talking about, you know, thoughts of death or suicide, then again, the psychotherapy and the psychiatric treatment is going to really help. Again, just feeling the medication giving a boost, more serotonin available in the brain or other neurotransmitters, giving them a boost, okay, as well as in the psychotherapy, we learn how to, you know, different coping skills with clients. Obviously, in the work I do, I look at the whole person. So I want to look at nutrition. I want to look, you know, recommend exercise. I want to recommend, you know, obviously we're looking at...
Exercising is so good when you are feeling down, because it takes you out of that mentality, at least for the moment when you're playing or doing an activity.
Well, it can feel really good, but especially after you exercise, you get a serotonin boost in your brain. So then you get this kind of like little high, if you will, where you feel like a sudden burst. But there's a lot of things that can be helpful, and this is where, you know, it's a safe place to talk with somebody where we can figure out what's working, what's not working, and how can we move towards your goal. Right? And again, if somebody is experiencing any thoughts of suicide, there's also the suicide prevention line, which is 1-800-273-8255 in the United States. You can talk to anyone at any time. It's a suicide prevention line. But if you have any thoughts and plans of suicide, please call 911 and go to the nearest emergency room. With help, you will feel better, right? So with the proper help, you will feel better. Again, sometimes we might talk to friends or family and they might try to help, but they may or may not have the right words to say. I know you mentioned that earlier, just snap out of it. Oh, come on, just pull up your bootstraps. Or, you know, we don't talk about, you know, there's all these messages we don't talk about, or dirty laundry outside of the family. If you're not feeling great, the main thing is talk to the right people and get the right help. And that is going to help you feel more like yourself again.
For sure. Wow. Thank you so much for being here, first of all. This was amazing. I really enjoyed. Thank you. And for everybody who is going through any of the things that we mentioned, right, and they feel like there is no solution, no help out there, I will repeat what you said because I thought it was the best. It was like, life can be so much better, right?
When you get the right help,
Yeah.
life can be so much better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Carla. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
And for everybody watching, thank you so much. We will be back with a new episode next week. See you then.